welcome back. So, we will continue with environmental planning part. So, in today's lecture, we will be covering different types of environmental planning. There are several types of environmental planning, but some common types, that is what we are going to cover in today's class. That is land use planning, urban planning, watershed, biodiversity, hazard and disaster management and energy planning. So, these are the common types of environmental planning which let us cover today. So, land use planning, as you know, it is a systematic process of evaluating, allocating and regulating land resources in a sustainable manner. Our earth has almost how much percent land? 29% land and 71% is the water. So, basically when we say land use planning, as the words indicate, planning the use of land. So, whatever land is available to us, we plan it how we are going to use, and since the ultimate objective is to achieve sustainable development, so it has to be done in a sustainable manner. So, the key aspects which comes under the land use planning, it's consider the suitability of land. Like we cannot use any portion of land for any activity. Suppose if there is a desert land in the state of Rajasthan, we cannot use it for agriculture, right. So, the suitability of land has to be according to the purpose for which it is going to be used. Balances competing demands. Suppose there is a small piece of land and there are multiple demands, like we want to build a hospital on that land or we want to build a landfill on that. So, these are like conflicting demands, competing demands. So, we have to balance accordingly, like what thing is more important, the placement of which activity on that piece of land will be more sustainable. So, those things need to be taken into account. And as all the planning related to environment involves policies, regulations and participatory decision making, land use planning also includes the same, and each of these type of planning aims at sustainable development. So, these are different components of environment or the land where we can have usage. It can be used for natural purposes, it can be used for man-made purposes, like you see like forest, underground, pastures, land. These are the naturally occurring things which occupy the percentage of land. And then we have rural and urban areas which has different activities which can be done on different pieces of land. For example, like there is a water body, there is like agriculture, tourism, infrastructure, mining. So, all these things they need to be properly planned and allocated designated percentage of land. So, let us take one example of a region in Tamil Nadu, that is the Kudalur region. Here it is the example of land use plan which shows like all the bigger roads, the major roads are shown by this boundary, these are the minor roads and these are the streets. All those lines which you see on the map, those are the like the transportation pathways, mainly the roads and streets. But if you look at the types of usage of land, there is agriculture land, that is in yellow color. So, this is like you see there is agriculture land spread all over the region. Then you see this river or creek, the blue water body. Okay. So, river or creek is something which occurs naturally. So, that is going to be there along with let us say beach or sandy or the mangroves. And what is it which will need more planning or more like what can I say, more importance or more time from by human beings, that is going to be the built up land, and that is what you see it is in the majority, the orange color land. So, because the built up land is something where we are setting up our houses, municipal organizations, industries and use it for residential purposes or human beings. So, that built up land, it is going to be occupying some percentage of agricultural land or any available land which would have been dedicated for some other purpose, maybe vegetation or maybe it would have been a grassland or maybe it would have been just an empty land lying with the government. So, for these type of placements of different land use purposes, that is called as land use, and this land use map shows like where is the plantation, where is the open space. So, if a government or a company has to plan some new construction, we need a open land. We cannot do that construction in a place where something is already there. Similarly, like if it is a like ecologically sensitive area like say beach or sandy patch or the mangroves, we cannot do or we cannot remove those or do some construction on that. So, those are the benefits like when we do the proper land use planning, and the land use plan map shows us what are the possible avenues or where are the possible avenues where new constructions or new modifications in the existing land usage can be done. So, the objectives of land use plan would be optimal utilization of land, that is fine, because since it can be used for multiple purpose, we need to use it optimally. Balanced development, like I said, there should be conflict reduction or competing demands balancing. Environmental protection, infrastructure integration. What do you mean by infrastructure integration? It is like suppose we have to set up a railway network or a road or a highway or infrastructure like buildings like agriculture or a farm or a hospital or schools, they need to be properly integrated, taken into account where they are actually required most. So, we cannot have a school or a hospital like say 10 kilometers away from the residential area, it has to be nearby residential area, because those are the basic necessities where people would be going on a daily basis. So, that is infrastructure integration. Then food and livelihood security, there should be some portion of land which is dedicated to food or agriculture, because that is what we need to survive. Similarly, climate resilience. So, we cannot cut down all the trees or remove all the grasslands from the land area to make a developed city, because that will reduce the climate resilience. So, all those things need to be taken into account, and these are the objectives of an efficient land use plan. I will show you with respect to Indian examples what we are doing under each of these objectives. Like for optimal utilization, we have a national land use policy framework proposed by Government of India. For balanced development, like mainly for urban areas, we have smart cities mission. Then for environmental protection, like for forestation, like for protecting forest boundaries and green areas, we have CAMPA Act, which is compensatory Forestation Fund Act. Then for conflict reduction, we have land pooling scheme, the one which is applicable in Delhi. For infrastructure integration, you can have the examples of Delhi Mumbai Industrial Corridor, where there is a building of proper highway and roadways and railways and other means of transportation between Delhi and Mumbai, so that industrial connect is proper. Food and livelihood security, we have agricultural land zoning in the states of Punjab and Haryana. And for climate resilience, you can have example of coastal regulation zone rules, because most of the bigger metro cities in India, they are along the coastal regions. All the ports, harbors, they are along the coast. So, there it can have a huge impact on economy and the land use. So, coastal regulation zones are there. So, that was about land use planning. The second was urban planning. We can think of it as a subset of land use planning, because land, it includes all the land, including urban, rural or natural or man-made areas, but urban planning would be focusing strictly on cities and towns. So, what does it say? It involves strategic design and regulation of the first point, land use, infrastructure, because without infrastructure cities and towns won't exist, and the built environment. When I say built environment, it is artificial or man-made structures which exist in the environment, and you design and regulate these things in such a way that it would promote sustainable, equitable and thriving communities in the cities and towns. So, the key components of any urban plan would include zoning. So, if you look at any city map, there are different zones. Sometimes cities are divided into wards or areas, sometimes it is divided into blocks. Okay. So, that is the zoning. Then we have green belt, a separate green belt where there would be a set of parks or a lot of trees existing in one area. So, that can be called as a green belt. Housing, residential areas are typically concentrated or it can be scattered, but you will rarely find any single house existing somewhere. So, it will be at least in a form of a colony or a block. Public buildings, those are the bigger residential complexes or the bigger buildings compared to the individual housing of people. Recreation centers, that is important for promoting the social pillar of the sustainability, right. Then road systems, which include the infrastructure like the movement of public or movement of people along the within that area. And finally is the transport facilities, like how do you commute from one place to other. So, these 7 things need not sum up the entire urban plan, but these are the major key components which should not be missed while we make some urban plan. Let us take one example of the city of Chandigarh. I think in India we have several cities which are planned, but if we talk about the top 5 or 6 most planned cities, Chandigarh would top the list. Then there are other cities like Gurgaon, Noida, Lavasa, which have been Jaipur, which comes in the category of properly planned cities. Chandigarh is very famous, it is very clean, it is formed in a like a grid like structure. The sectors are arranged in the form of a grid. That is what you can see from this map. So, this is the urban plan of Chandigarh, and all these color designations and marking, they represent different types of areas. For example, this blue portion, obviously it is easy to understand, it is the water bodies. There is a Sukna lake, which is a very good recreational spot for all the people and tourists who come to Chandigarh, and it has been developed for as a recreational place also. Then you have all these brown areas which are public and semi-public area. So, again which is used by common public. Then you have commercial and wholesale areas which are blue in color. It is not as big as the public, semi-public or the common residential areas. Like you see, just like in the land use plan which I showed you for the Tamil Nadu region, here also you can spot like for a city, for a urban area, most of the land is occupied by residential usage of land, okay, because the population of India is increasing, the area of land that is going to be there, it is going to stay constant. So, the extent or the percentage of residential occupancy of land is going to increase. Then you have these green spaces for forest, agriculture, for recreation. Those are typically like observed on the boundaries of the city, though there are some green spots in almost each of the sectors. If you notice carefully, in each of these sectors and blocks, you see these small green dots, which means some space has been allocated to green belt, to construction of trees, having forest, parks, which is important for maintaining that climate resilience, for having fresh air, and to keep the aesthetic appearance of those areas. So, that was all about urban planning. So, we have covered 2 types of planning. One was land use, second was urban. Both are somewhat related to each other, but land use planning is much broader. It can go beyond urban area, beyond cities and towns. Urban planning is restricted to cities and towns. Now, after looking at, but both of them were mainly concerned about the land part. Now, the third type of common environmental planning is watershed planning. So, it obviously, as the name says, it is related to water. What is it mean? It is an integrated management and development of a geographical area that drains into a water source or water body like river, stream, lake and reservoirs. So, all of you are aware of the water cycle, like there is evaporation, the vapor goes up, it forms clouds, and then clouds, and they condense or precipitate in the form of rain, and then that rainwater is going back to seas and ocean to different routes. So, as you can see, there is a precipitation, then there is infiltration, groundwater, some water goes to rivers, wetlands, and then overland flow. Now, what exactly is watershed planning? How do we plan this aspect of water in our life? And it focuses mainly on 5 key aspects, that is soil, water, land, human resources and vegetation. So, when we say we want to plan a watershed, these 5 aspects are taken into account. For example, like if there is excess water, there would be soil erosion. So, to stop that, we will have to do some arrangement, right. The construction of these houses or some dams or canals and channels or streams or the drainage lines, all those would contribute to watershed planning. Let us take one example to make it clear. This is an example of Trimbakeshwar. It is a hill station in the Nasik district of Maharashtra. The yellow boundary, it represents the watershed boundary. Okay. So, if again as the land use plans showed, the green one is the forest cover and red one is the human settlement. Then you have hills, you have lot of surface streams, and then there are surface water bodies and within the watershed boundary, and it is not very huge area. Like if you look at the scale, it is around 3000 feet for this. So, it looks like almost 9000 feet, and then you just multiply it to get the square feet area. Now, there are several streams coming from the hills and mountains, and then there are several water bodies existing on the surface of the ground. So, how do we manage that in such a way it contributes to sustainable development? So, if you look at, there are gully plugs, check dams, dug wells. Okay. So, these are man-made things. It is in our hand, we have to decide like where we are going to put these gully plugs or check dams or dug wells. Wells are like basically something which is a hole dig into the ground to access the shallow water, the water which is at the shallow level, which can be used for drinking and other purposes. That is a dug well. So, where to dug wells, how to replenish it or recover it, and what to do with it when it is dry, those things are in our hand. Then check dams and gully plugs to control the flow of water, to avoid damages to the soil or the banks of the river, to minimize siltation, to minimize erosion. So, those things need to be planned properly, and those are accounted for in the watershed planning. So, if we talk about the major objectives or the purpose of watershed planning, it would be reduce flooding. Okay. So, even in cities, if there is excess rain, like those who are from Delhi can relate to it, whenever there is a heavy rainfall for 15-20 minutes, most of the areas in the cities, at least those under the flyovers, they get heavily flooded. Okay. To reduce that flooding, I think watershed planning could help. Contamination and excessive siltation. So, these are the objectives. Another thing is to improve the water quality, the access to the water, and manage the storm water. Like the Delhi example which I gave, it was mainly for the storm water. Okay. And this flooding, contamination, siltation, it applies to almost all the water bodies which are either stagnant or flowing over the land surface. So, this was about watershed planning. So, we have covered 3: land use, urban and watershed. Let us look at the 4th type of common environmental planning, which is biodiversity planning. You see, environment, it is made of 2 types of components, as we studied in the first lecture, biotic and abiotic. So far all different types of planning that we have covered, they are different components of the environment. So, land, water, those were the abiotic components. Biodiversity has to do something with the biotic component of the environment. So, what is it mean? It is the process of conserving, managing and sustainably using biological resources or the biotic components to maintain ecological balance and support human well-being. If you carefully look at the definitions of different types of planning that we covered so far, this human angle has not been missed ever, because ultimately everything is about ecosystem providing services and doing their functions, and though from those services and functions, who is deriving the benefits? It is the human beings, and who is going to have impact on the environment? It is the human activities. Okay. So, that is why whenever we plan any component of the environment, the human angle has to be accounted for. So, if you look at biodiversity planning, this picture shows different types of biodiversities or diversities which need to be taken into account. For example, landscape diversity. So, landscape diversity means it can be a type of vegetation or land, like whether it is a grassland, whether it is a forest land or wetland, that diversity should be maintained. We cannot convert all the land into grassland or remove all the grassland and convert it into some other type of land use. Similarly, corridors and sources areas, like there are blue corridors means having water channels, water canals. Green corridor means having all the greenery around. There are some blue green corridors where you have a stream of water, it can be within a city or in a town or a village, and along the water stream or river banks there would be grass plantations or the tree plantations, which means the blue green corridor. That corridor has both blue and green appearance. Then species. Biodiversity is very important when it comes to different types of species. There are some native species, some migrating species, some endangered species. There are different types of species, and each of those species should be accounted for while doing any modification in their ecosystem or habitat. For example, pollinators, bugs, pests, like using chemicals to kill those pests, those need to be also properly planned, so that it does not affect the balance of the ecosystem. For example, in agriculture, to control pests we use pesticide, but excess use of pesticide may kill some other bugs which are useful and may have negative impacts on the crop or as well as soil. and if there is excess use of fertilizers and pesticides, even the crops or the food grains, they also absorb those chemicals, and when they enter the food chain, they can affect human health. So, that is how all these things are related. So, when we say biodiversity planning, we need to take into account all the biological resources, using them in a sustainable manner. I think this is the one before the last one, hazard and disaster management planning. There are two types of hazards or disasters. One is natural, one is man-made. Right? In natural, it can be earthquake, flood, tsunami, wild. These are not in our hand; they happen naturally. And then there are some man-made. It can be pollution, accidents, cutting trees, that is deforestation, unplanned development, like making anything anywhere without proper planning. So, these may be the reasons for hazards or disasters. Now, when it comes to planning for these hazards and disaster, what does it mean? It means the planning itself, it is the process of preparing for, mitigating, responding and recovering from natural or man-made any type of hazard in order to reduce the risk and protect people, property and planet or environment. Again, protecting people, planet and property means doing it in a sustainable manner, addressing all three pillars of sustainability. So, if you look at the hazard management cycle, if there is any disaster and that disaster is going to have some impact for sure, what is in our hand? Once disaster is there, we can only respond to it and try to recover as much we can, like whatever losses and damages happened, we can try to recover from that. Once we have done the recovery, then we try to redevelop or develop that place again, and we come up with mitigation measures so that those disasters do not happen, or if they happen, we have mitigation or the counter measures at place, and the related one is the preparedness. So, most of the sometimes disasters we are not even prepared for. So, if we are already prepared for a disaster, the impact which it is going to have will be reduced. For example, suppose in Uttarakhand we often have landslides or the cloud burst. Now, we know that it is going to be during these 2-3 months of the monsoon. It does not happen in the other like remaining 9-10 months of the year. So, the preparedness during those 2-3 months should be at a higher level compared to the rest of the year. So, that is what preparedness means. So, this planning for hazard and disaster management, again, because hazards and disaster they have been happening since ages. So, for planning we need to have some basis, some data, some history. So, this planning emphasizes the importance of learning from past experiences, and based on that learning we build the resilience and reduce the impact of future disasters. As far as man-made disasters are concerned, we can try to even avoid or prevent them, but for natural disasters we need to be prepared and we need to have all these response and mitigation measures at place. So, that is the one type of environmental planning, which is hazard and disaster management planning. The final, the last one for this lecture is energy planning, because energy and environment goes hand in hand together. All those energy resources comes from the environment, and any usage of energy mostly from fossil fuels, it is going to have impact on the environment. So, what is energy planning? It is the process of developing strategies for production, distribution and efficient use of energy resources, again in a sustainable way to meet present and future demands in a sustainable, reliable and affordable way. So, that is what energy planning is, and how we do it. There are different ways to do it. So, the objectives of energy planning would be like you use no or low cost or energy efficiency improvement measures, like try to increase the efficiency of equipment at reduced cost, introduce energy efficient or new technologies, optimize or integrate system performance, develop administrative legal framework like which will check like whether you are following the compliances or not. Suppose if the government makes a rule for industries that they should use at least 10% of the renewable energy, then to check that there should be an administrative and legal framework. Then energy consumption database, and so we need to know like what kind of energy is consumed where, and that data should be available. Then awareness and capacity building in the domain of energy or energy sector, that will help a lot in reducing the energy wastage or losses. And then energy efficiency institutional setup, Like if there are recognized governmental institutions like CPCB, SPCB or Bureau of Energy Efficiency, we have CEA, and so those institutions, because of those setups, proper plans and policies related to energy sector can be implemented. So those are all the aspects or objectives of energy planning, and I think that's what covers today's class. But before that, let's cover one example of energy planning for industrial parks. So this is I think from a research paper in China. So this is like an energy center, and energy comes from electricity, steam. These utilities, the electricity and steam are the utilities. To generate these utilities, we need energy. It can come from grid, PV, wind, power plant, all different sources. Now, to properly manage the flow and usage of these energy sources and the utilities in respective demand points, that also needs a planning. So, for this is for an industrial park, a case study, but this kind of type of energy planning would be required in almost all industries individually. It can be required at a regional scale for a town, for a city, for a state or for a nation also. So, at different scales, like as we had seen earlier, where there are different types of planning based on the scope and location and the region and timing, energy planning can be done. So, for this aspect, the key aspects were the resource assessment, demand forecasting, sustainable supply, efficiency and policy support. So, when we say resource assessment, like what are the possible sources we have for getting energy? Then demand, how much energy we are going to require. Like if we are doing it for one industry, that industry would have its vision to grow by a certain percentage in certain time. So, accordingly what would be the growth in energy demand? So, those need to be accounted for. Then is there a sustainable supply to satisfy that demand? Does the infrastructure or the technologies that we use, are they efficient or not? And is there a proper policy within the company as well as from the government side which would support the drive to make some changes in energy usage and consumption and generation for our industry in a sustainable way. So, all those things form the key aspects of energy planning. So, to summarize, in this lecture what we covered was different types of environmental planning, starting with land use, urban. These are somewhat related to each other because both happens mostly on land. Then the watershed planning, it is mainly related to the water bodies and the impact of soil vegetation on the water bodies. Then biodiversity, it is related to the biotic component of the environment, mainly human beings, birds, animals, flora, fauna. And hazard and disaster management, again it is related to both types of hazards or disasters, man-made as well as natural ones. So, we need to be prepared, we need to have a plan, recovery response plan and mitigation. And finally, was the energy planning, which is based on how much energy resources we have, what is our future prediction, what is the demand, what are the efforts towards efficiency. So, all those things need to be accounted in the form of a plan, and that is what comprises energy planning. Thank you so much.